mean, I just think it's cool that like just Spotify as a whole is like engaging in like the producer community more, like the stuff with Amir, with like, you know, Traffic Jams, and then like all the other stuff. It's just, it's cool. The Secret Genius.
Yes,
I mean,
that's right.
So cool.
There's also, I don't know if you've ever heard of this like New York City producers meetup, but it's kind of like an informal community, and it's meetup. It's like up and like coming / aspiring producers, music producers, but all kinds of genres. And they were like, they sent us a video like, hey Spotify, could we like, you know, come use your space and partner up? And so we're probably gonna try to host at least one with them.
That's awesome.
We'll see how that goes.
That stuff happens.
I'm super duper like all about that. You know, I have like a podcast and you know, all that producers shit. I'm super into.
Awesome.
So I grew up in a town called Bloomfield, New Jersey. Has everyone heard of it before? Oh wow, surprising. How many people from Jersey in here? All right, Jersey in here. 201-973? 732. So I grew up in Bloomfield. My father was a musician. He played guitar. He had like 3 brothers that all played instruments. So I remember like going up to the Bronx over the weekend and just like watching them jam out. Like my dad played guitar, and then I had another uncle who played drums, and then another uncle who sang. So I was around a lot of that stuff. And then my dad would compose music too at the crib. So, you know, there would be like drum sets and guitars and bass and instruments all over the place and keyboards. And I was just a kid, like kind of running around, and like I've always been around the music, and being at home, you know, he played a lot of music while we were at the house. So I was just always around it.
What kind of, like, what artists did you listen to, and what kind of music?
So my dad was big on like soul, like a lot of the classic stuff, like Michael Jackson, obviously, Stevie, Earth, Wind and Fire, and then like Rare Earth, and some like classic rock stuff. Scorpion, he was a big fan of, and like jazz too. He was like a really big jazz head. So, you know.
What he was playing as well? Like, was he
he played a lot of jazz. He played a lot of rock. And it was kind of a little bit of everything, honestly.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So I know like you're pretty close to your dad, and like he kind of helped you get into music. So how did you make that transition? Like, what inspired you to start making music on your own?
So he never used to let me touch his keyboards and shit, right? Like he would literally yell at me if I touched any of his stuff. So one day, I think I was like 12 years old. One day he wasn't home. He left and he wasn't home, and I saw the keyboard and I'm like, should I go for it? So I went for it, and I started messing around with it. And at the time, he had this like Roland KR 4500 keyboard, and at the time I think it was like $7,000 or something. I remember my mom like yelled at him when he bought it. But anyway, we weren't really like rich. We were like, you know, pretty like lower middle class. And so one day I just like saw it, started messing with the keyboard, and that keyboard allowed for you to like compose music on it. So I didn't know I was like making music.
Whatever sounded like good to you.
Whatever sounded good to me. So like I didn't know what I was doing, but I was just kind of messing around. And that was kind of like my start to like composing music. And then from there, as I got older, I started doing more research, and then that was around the time that I like fell in love with like hip hop, and like I heard, you know, like J Dilla and like DJ Premier and all the classic like Tribe Called Quest shit. And I just fell in love with it. Like I just wondered, like, you know, who's making the music? Like what are music producers? Like who's putting this stuff together? And it just became an addiction.
You're also like a video game head growing up too.
Oh yeah.
So and like the music and the video games are pretty cool to you as well. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So do you guys remember MTV Music Generator for PlayStation? I'm not. No, definitely not. Yes. 3 nerds in here. Good. So there's this video game for PlayStation called MTV Music Generator, and it allowed for you to like make beats on the PlayStation. And then there was another video game for Super Nintendo called Mario Paint. Have you guys heard of Mario Paint before? So there was an option on Mario Paint where you can, you know, like compose beats. And again, I was just like a kid. I was a little kid playing video games, and I bought that game, and I didn't know I was composing music, but the music making part of the game was like my favorite part of the game. And so just all those things, you know, like I never knew what I was doing. I was just kind of like gravitating towards just composing music.
Experimenting and like
Yeah.
falling into it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you mentioned that, you know, you discovered hip hop around that time. So what was like an album or track that like really got you? You said like, yo, I need to know more about this.
I want to say the album that really got me thinking like, whoa, like who did this? This is crazy. Is probably, it's an album by a group called Slum Village. And the album is called Fantastic Volume 2. Raise your hand if you know about that album. Okay. Real heads, no. No. So, and then from there, I'm like, who did these beats? And then like I found this guy named J Dilla, rest in peace, the greatest hip hop producer of all time. I just did my research and found out some other shit that he produced. Like I found out he was part of like Tribe Called Quest stuff, and like Q-Tip was like his mentor. And then, you know, when I started making beats, I wanted to be him. I wanted to mimic him.
Right.
So I was literally just like listening to his stuff and then just copying what he was doing. And at the time, I didn't know that I was like learning along the way how to make beats just by like mimicking him. So.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Jackson said like study the greats and then be greater. So that's exactly what you were doing.
Exactly.
What equipment did you use when you first started out to make music? Aside from like the video game.
The video game. The first real piece of equipment was like a poor man's beat machine. I got it on eBay for $200. It's called an Akai S20, which I actually still have to this day. And it's this like small like machine with like a floppy drive and like really dinky buttons. And it was just really a piece of shit. But I couldn't afford an MPC. There's this machine called an MPC back then, where you could make beats, but at the time it was like $3,000, and I didn't have the money, so I went on eBay and got this little piece, and that was like my first real, you know, machine or whatever.
And like, what kind of beats were you making, or like ideas? Like, what were you doing?
J Dilla knockoffs, like, you know, like just trying to sound like what I liked. You know, in the beginning for me, it was a lot of just, okay, I love that beat, like I want to make that beat, right? And so it was a lot of just like mimicking and copying and, you know, kind of learning while I was doing that. I didn't know that I was picking up those techniques as I was going along the way. And that was the process for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah. When I was studying J Dilla, and like, so J Dilla, his sort of specialty is like drums, right? So he does this really crazy shit with his drums. I don't know, like, well, I know now kind of how he does it, but there's this like swing and rhythm in his drums, and I've always just like wanted to swing my drums the way he did. So I would just study him and mimic him and swing my drums the way he did. And then Pete Rock, like you said, Pete Rock is another producer, and I guess one of his specialties was like his bass lines. Like his bass lines were always just so funky and so dirty and grimy. And so I would literally just like listen to his shit over and over and just try to mimic it and just tell myself like, man, how do I make my bass lines sound like his? And then I would do that with different producers, like try to learn all these different techniques until the point where like I'm picking up all of those techniques and kind of making them into my own in a way. So yeah, and I still do that to this day. Like I'll listen to shit and just be like, yo, like how the fuck did they do that?
Yeah.
And then I'll just like dig right into it and try to learn how to do it. So
sometimes do you think that can like stunt your growth in terms of like trying to emulate one of your idols?
No, I think it's the opposite. I don't think it stunts your growth. I think as a creative, we're all influenced by what we love, right? Whether the medium is making music or painting or videography or fashion, I think we all tap into this like part of our subconscious brain of like what our influences are. So we're not consciously copying the art. I think we're just kind of doing it free flow. And when you create something that you love, you're naturally gonna be influenced by what you love anyway.
Gotcha.
So my philosophy with music making is, you know, I like creating stuff that I love. And so if I love J Dilla and I love Pete Rock and I love jazz music and I love trap music, all that shit's gonna come out in my music, right, you know, organically. So in the beginning, it was a lot of like you know, it was the opposite. It was a lot of like copying and trying stuff and like making really shitty beats and then making a few good ones. But then after a while, I guess it's like muscle memory. It's like riding a bike almost. Like you program your brain to just tap into this like whole other creative world, and then just comes out. You know, just like it's hard to explain. It's just more like it just happens. Like when I'm in the studio with an artist or like with a musician or just like by myself, I'll literally shut everything down. I'm composing something, and I don't know. You just kind of like tap into this whole other side of you, almost. So above my speakers, there's a shelf with a bunch of Star Wars like figurines and shit. I'm like a big Star Wars guy. It's all Empire stuff, by the way, like, you know, fucking Darth Vader and all that, stormtroopers. So I put a lot of my personality into my room, because also too, when I have like artists come in and musicians, I want them to feel like they're like in my world, if that makes sense. So like there's Star Wars shit, and then like little trinkets here and there and all that stuff. So yeah, my dad's guitar's in there. So yeah, my job as a music producer is to work with the artist and try to bring the best out of that person, right? So like I'm not really concerned with like flexing my production muscle. I'm more like, okay, J. Cole, we get in the studio. My job is to create a piece of music that can inspire you to write the best piece of music possible in that moment. And it's different with every artist, right? So when you start to approach music making in that way, you tend to really just fit the pieces where they need to be and not like do extra shit and overproduce stuff. And you learn that like over time. Like I learned that the hard way, for sure.
Like giving them space to kind of create.
Give them space, man. You can't just flex your shit. You really have to just ease into it and like understand like how to really produce someone, you know? Yeah. In the early years, probably the first 5-6 years, for me it was all about being able to produce full time and generating enough income to be able to do it full time and not have a job. So I needed to pay rent. I needed to, you know, buy food and just live life. Like you could be the worst rapper in the world, and I wouldn't care. It'd be like, all right, $500, cool, PayPal, here you go. You know, I don't have to get a day job because I'm generating anywhere between $1,500 and $4,000 a month. I can pay my rent. I'm doing okay. But then after a few years, I'm looking back and I'm like, yo, after all these beats that I sold, like, this is literally like hundreds of songs that suck. That all suck. Like from shitty rappers that I don't like, uploading their shit on YouTube produced by Illmind. I'm not retweeting that shit. You know, like I don't want anyone to know I did that because you suck. You know, so like it was again a learning lesson for me because I'm like, well, I'm making money, but like I'm making really shitty music. And again, there's a few exceptions. There were a couple people that I liked, but 95% of the rappers I was working with sucked, in my opinion. So I had to learn that and then switch my mentality and say, you know what, fuck the money, fuck selling my beats to just anyone. Let me start developing artists and let me start working with artists that I'm inspired by and really just try to nurture sort of like a deeper relationship with these people. And maybe if I do that, I can make better music. And lo and behold, after a couple years, my confidence started to increase, my music became better, and I started to really build and build real relationships with real people, and it just became fun again, you know, and that's when my career really started to thrive. DJ set. We're gonna turn up the noise, turn up the volume. I don't know. We'll have fun.
Really appreciate that, man.
Yeah. What's your producer name?
Dirty Beats.
Dirty Beats. So you want me to say
G-U-R-T-Y.
G-U-R-T-Y. Gertie.
Yeah.
Dirty Beats. Boom.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, man.
Likewise, man. Thank you. It's been a
Yeah, man.
long time. So.
Thank you so much. What do you use?
This is just like a little portable office setup.
Yeah.
I use Reason, and I got a little,
That update though.
Yeah, for real.
Crazy.
Come on.
Crazy.
Come on. I was trying to learn like Logic, but you know, like you get that learning curve, and like you're just trying to sit down and be creative, and you got like as soon as you hit roadblock, like 15 minutes of a YouTube tutorial.
Exactly.
And it's like here's your creative flow.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, man. That like I went to SAE Institute. They give you like a whole audio bundle that came with like the complete package that I just sat on for like 2 years. Didn't even use the shit.
Yeah.
And yeah, as soon as that like Reason 9.5 came out, it was like
Game changer.